Welcome to the greatest show where we have people to talk to about things. I'm DJ Allen, and I'm joined by Trisha.
Hi.
Kevin, or Metal Jesus.
I used to have long hair, that's why.
Yeah.
Now,
And our esteemed guest, the mecca of RPG, Eddy Webb.
And I still have long hair, so.
fuck you.
I feel like we have 4 varying stages of hair, from DJ to Metal to me to Eddy.
Yeah, I went bald in my 20s. Kevin literally just cut his hair a couple of months ago.
A month ago?
Okay.
Here?
Oh, wow.
Trisha keeps getting her hair cut to that asymmetrical look, and then we've got Eddy, who doesn't look like he's seen a barber this decade.
Not since Ireland, actually.
I was so I listened to the Onyx Pathcast. I came across it completely by accident on episode 1, so I found it immediately when it came out.
Oh, nice.
And then when you mentioned on the show that you weren't in Ireland, or you had mentioned that you were on the East Coast somewhere instead of being in Ireland, I'm like, because I know that the first time I asked you, trying to coordinate Irish time and here would have been a little bit nightmarish, but I would have figured out a way.
Yeah, because this would have been 3 a.m.
Right. And so then to make that 10 for you, I would have had to be, I'd have had to be on at like 8 in the morning or something to that effect.
Let's see, if it was 10 p.m. for me, it would have been 8, so actually 2 p.m. for you.
2 p.m.
Yeah.
So way earlier in the day.
Yes.
And since I am a mailman, that makes it difficult if I don't have the Saturday off, like I did not today.
I can understand that would be a problem.
I burnt my head too. It's the first time it's seen sun since, I don't know, a long time. I wear a hat all the time, and I decided not to wear a hat yesterday, and boom, now it's red and rosy.
And I love that this will all speak great in the audio-only version of the podcast.
I comment about that all the time. Like, that encourages the audio people to check out the video, because I leave the video up.
Extra bonus features.
I did put out the only 2 gaming books that I physically own. Everything else is digital. Because I love the game, and I got some people to play it with me while I was in the Navy, but they weren't really into it. I loved the game. I would love to play it all the time, but
Yeah, I mean, have you checked out 20th anniversary edition for Wraith? We're just wrapping that one up.
So
Really? Huh.
I wanted to do. I want the physical book, but I'm also smart enough to realize that I should probably get the digital, because where we live is not very spacious, and having physical media is kind of a problem. So
I know that pain.
So like when V20 came out, I got it digitally instead of physically because of that reason.
Right.
I did buy the Chronicles of Darkness and Vampire the Requiem when they came out initially as books, but have since sold them off and got digital versions because of the space issue.
Yeah, I know the feeling. I mean, especially with an international move, I got rid of a lot of my physical gaming books. I have like 10% of what I used to own originally. But now it's all digital stuff because it's just easier to keep track of.
And sadly, you can't dog ear anything, but digitally you should be able to bookmark all kinds of stuff. So, I mean, I can carry hundreds of books with me on an iPad.
Yeah, and also you can like mark things up. You can highlight things, so you're not ruining the book or anything.
Yeah.
It's nice.
You know, I think when Morgan moved to England, one of our friends, I think that all she brought was media. I think she left everything else at home and was worried about whether or not she could find a VCR and was bringing all kinds of books and VHS tapes and like that's all she moved with.
Wow.
Morgan, it has a large Doctor Who collection, and that's how we kind of hooked up, was that I'm a Doctor Who fan too. So
Oh, so am I.
Now, are you from the old stuff or just the new stuff?
All of it. I mean, I'll show you how nerdy I am. Hang on a second. I have the Big Finish stuff on my phone. The audio dramas.
I've listened to a lot of it. Let me show you how nerdy I am.
Oh, we better. Yeah. Okay. All right. Hang on. Where is it? Oh, it's on this bookshelf. Damn it. Oh, I also have the About Time books. They're the analysis of all the different seasons.
Gotcha.
And now I'm lacking.
So
I have
new series.
I have this hanging on our fridge.
Nice. Hold on. Yeah, I got the Tom Baker.
He's my favorite.
He is mine too. I
personally like them all, but I like Colin Baker the best because he's the one with the coat. But he never got a chance to kind of stretch his legs on TV, but he really got a chance in audio, and I've been.
Oh yeah, especially his run with Evelyn is fantastic.
Whenever I see one of his, I immediately go get it.
Yeah, Colin Baker on Big Finish is fantastic.
You're kind of quiet.
Now I feel like I'm lacking.
Yeah.
Well,
don't worry, I'm going to be completely lost to the rest of the conversations.
No,
right. This is the moment. You know, we got a little moment.
This is all I get.
And then we leave her behind after this.
I do have one question that I haven't gotten a chance to ask anybody important about yet. Now,
I'm not.
Well,
well, I see how we rate, Kevin.
You're on the inside. So, White Wolf did the whole Storyteller's Vault thing. Is there going to be anything like that for the Chronicles of Darkness?
Yeah, that's White Wolf. I don't know.
Okay. Because the response I kind of got from them, because I did ask somebody, the kind of response I got from them was it was kind of up to Onyx Path. So I was like, well, now I'm confused.
That's news to me. Interesting.
Because of the two vampires, I like Requiem better. I don't mind Masquerade, but I like Requiem better.
Mm-hmm.
And I have lots of ideas and things I want to put out, but that's how I want to put them out as a Storyteller's Vault.
That's all. I mean, we're just kind of exploring it ourselves. I mean, we did Canis Minor for the Pugmire game, and we did a Slarison Vault for Scarred Lands. So I mean, it's something, the community concept is something we definitely want to do, and we've already got Scion at least, and probably Trinity Continuum as well. So it's definitely a concept we like. But to be fair, the Chronicles Darkness stuff, that's a slightly different chunk of Onyx Path, so I don't know all the details of it. And Rich may have already been thinking about that with the Drive-Thru guys about doing community content for that, and I just wasn't in that meeting or whatever. So cool, yeah. I mean, if it's on us, that's something might be interesting to do at some point.
And maybe somebody misspoke because I never get to talk to the same people twice whenever I contact anyone. So. But
yeah, it happens. I mean, the nature of this kind of thing is that because it's a license. So I mean, Onyx Path has a license from White Wolf to make these kinds of products. But also, we had license while the property transitioned from one company to another. So it is kind of a weird moment where we've actually been working on the products longer than the new companies had the license. So it occasionally neither side on this side wants to step on each other's toes. We all kind of respect each other. We want to make sure that both sides are doing really cool stuff. So every once in a while, sometimes a little bit of like, oh, is it okay if we do this? Oh, have you guys thought about that? So it's getting better as White Wolf settles in and starts wanting to make their stuff and moving forward with things. But I know, at least, especially the first year, there's a bit of like, okay, what do we do? How do we handle this? Because we're already making books, and now we have new people that we're reporting to and getting approvals from.
And that's why I kind of knew. That's why I kind of knew that things might be a little bit gray area for a while because of the whole big split. And now that they're making V5 with basically porting Requiem in, I was also wondering.
Well, I mean, I just looked at V5 myself a little bit ago, and it looks like definitely there's been some inspiration there, but they're also doing some really cool new things that we haven't done yet. So, I mean, it's less. and again, I'm not working on the game at all, so this is only little bits I've seen. It doesn't make sense of evolution. I mean, Vampire the Masquerade was the storyteller system, and then that evolved a couple of times, and then when World of Darkness came around, that was the storytelling system, and then that evolved for a couple of times, and then V20 also evolved in a different direction, and then now V5 is taken. So I mean, each step is kind of an evolution and drawing from what worked in previous versions. So I mean, I highly doubt it in here. I mean, much more along the lines of, oh, hey, those bits worked over the past 10 years of Chronicles of Darkness. So let's take some of those cool bits that really work well, and also some bits that worked from classic Vampire the Masquerade and classic World of Darkness. I would guess that'll probably be some of the inspiration for that. I also know that some of the people working that team just had some really fantastic ideas. Ken, and in particular, is a fantastic game designer. I know he's not really been in that White Wolf space, so I'm sure he's bringing a lot of really cool stuff to the table that we just have a style of design that we are.
Sweet. I don't want to be too role play heavy because I can already hear my wife's eyes rolling.
I'm keeping myself busy. I'm
and I haven't role played in any system except a White Wolf or Onyx Path system since 1993.
Let's leave it there. You just stated yourself.
The what?
You just stated yourself.
Right. So it's not that I haven't wanted to branch out. It's that there's been nobody to play with at all. And the one that I can catch everybody with is Vampire most of the time. And I did get a chance to run in Requiem, but I can't get anyone to let me be a player. I haven't been a player in over 15 years.
I know that pain.
I'm glad because no one else seems to oh, hey, we got Game Master here. Let's use him. No.
Yeah, luckily, in the past several years, I've been able to. Some people have been running stuff for me, which is a nice change of pace. Even games I've worked on, people have run for me recently, which is really, really nice. That almost never happens. But yeah, usually when it's like, let's play a game, I'm like, cool, what are you running? Thanks, sure.
I didn't plan on running anything. What are you running?
Right. It's like RPG chicken.
Yeah, I did have an actual play up for a while, but I have since lost all of the episodes of it. I'm very sad. It was a Requiem. Was it Requiem? Yeah, I think it was a Requiem game.
Yeah, there's been a whole bunch of World Darkness and Onyx Path podcasts. Actually, has coming out recently. In fact, there was a Facebook group I was a part of for a while that was basically just nothing but that, people noting them. So there's been like people that cycle through. There's one that's been a long running just Hunter the Vigil game. There's one that's actually they do narrative readings of different bits of fiction from both World of Darkness and Chronicles of Darkness. So it's interesting to see that a lot more of them have been kind of happening in the past few years in particular.
Well, mayhaps I need to be looking a little harder because I've been following Knights of the Night. They started out with Hunter the Vigil, but they haven't. The guy that was running it, I don't know what his life event is going on, but he's had some issue for the last year, and he hasn't had a chance to run it. They rotate games anyway, but yeah, they just haven't gone back to Hunter at any point. I do want to say for the viewer, if you go to this address right here, tlk.io/thegreatestshow, we do have a chat room open. I see how many viewers. I don't know if anybody else does. I don't think anybody else does. Happens.
Fair enough.
Are you a fan of anything other than Doctor Who?
Oh, jeez. Lots of things. Like today, actually, I went into kind of a side rant / nerd about Sherlock Holmes. I've always been a long time huge Sherlock Holmes fan, and Sherlock Holmes fandom is always fun because there's so many subdivisions and sub-subdivisions. It's a mess of how far you want to drill down. In fact, like today I was digging into how to explain this. So there's the Sherlock Holmes canon, the original stories that are written through. Then there's what are called pastiches, which are basically these are stories that are written in the style of Sherlock Holmes.
Okay.
And then about 50-ish years ago, there was a guy named August Derleth who wrote a homage/sequel series called Solar Ponds, which was set in the 20s, but Sherlock Holmes was part of that universe, and he got permission to do it, and he wrote like about 50 60 short stories with Solar Ponds, and it's gotten so popular that there's separate fandoms just for Solar Ponds. And now he hired somebody else has now licensed Solar Ponds from him and started writing additional stories. So there's like this chain of it goes all the way down, but it still ultimately is a kind of spur of the Sherlock Holmes fandom. So it's like punk, where if you get more than 4 people in a punk band together in a room, they immediately break off and become 2 subgenres. So, like, no, we're neo-Germanic punk. No, we're oi, but derived through. Yeah, I mean it's bonkers.
So do you like watch? My wife and I watch Sherlock, the English version. Do you watch any of the others?
I genuinely like Elementary, although I'm about a season and a half behind. I think Elementary is better than most people give it credit for, both as a Sherlock Holmes show and as just a procedural show. It's genuinely pretty good. I have not watched the new Japanese version, Miss Sherlock, that just came out on HBO. It's an HBO Asian. I think we're getting it soon. But I've been hearing good things about that.
Well, I can't wait to hear about that. I've not heard about that. That'll be interesting.
Seriously, I mean, it's nerd all the way down. I can go into really obscure portions of this, but basically, there's now a whole subgenre of modern day Sherlock Holmes. There's 2, Elementary. There's Sherlock. There's the one in Japan, Miss Sherlock. There's another one in I want to say Korea. Which name escapes me at the moment, I must admit. There's like at least 4 or 5 different prose versions of modern day Sherlock. So I mean, it's an entire genre in and of itself of just Sherlock in modern day. It's again ludicrous. And then it's not even going into stuff like Sherlock Holmes in the future, like Sherlock Holmes in the 22nd century, which was a cartoon show in the 90s. And
wow.
Yeah, it's every time I think I know I have a handle on all the Sherlock Holmes things, then it gets weirder. Although, I mean, relevant to this podcast though, have you guys played Consulting Detective?
No.
Really? There are it's actually Space Cowboys. It's called Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. There are actually 3 different box sets, but they're all independent. You can play each of them. You don't need a core set or anything. And the basic concept is that you're playing Sherlock Holmes. You're playing his subordinates, assistants, and so you get a case. So you get a case book. And actually, I said they have the box set here again. This would be great for the audio only people, but I will going to show you the components. So there's basically each one comes with a separate casebook, and inside the casebook there are basically different paragraphs that you can read, kind of like a choose your own adventure. Each one's kind of labeled and numbered, and then there's a map that you have that comes with a huge, beautiful map of London.
Wow.
And each area has a number associated with it. So if you say, I want to go to the scene of the crime, and the scene of the crime is, in the northwest corner of the city at 35, something lane, you go to 35 Northwest and read that section. And then there's like a directory of all the people in London, so you can look up people's addresses. There are newspapers in here, so you can read the newspapers and get information about the cases that you're following. And so basically, is you just kind of you go around reading all these sections in whatever order makes sense to you, until you think you have enough information, and then you go to Sherlock with your information, and he's already solved it, of course, because it's Sherlock Holmes. And so what happens is for each question you get right, you get a certain number of points, and then if you have to go to more places than Sherlock had to, you lose points for each additional place you go to. So you're trying to get as much information as possible, as few moves as possible to get the highest score. But it's completely cooperative. You can play by yourself. You can play with up to 8, 9 people. It's about 2 hours to go through a case, I've found. But yeah, it's kind of like half LARP, half role play, half board game. That's 3 halves, but I'm a game designer. I'll do math.
Half man, half bear, half pig. I know what you're talking about.
Like bare hands with actual bears. No. But you know, it's aside from being a Sherlock Holmes game, it's also genuinely an interesting game design in the sense that it's been around for about 30 plus years. The first English version came out in 1981, so it's been around for like 30 years. So it's an early cooperative game. But there's no randomizers, there's no cards. It's just you try to use all the information in your hand to make guesses. And sometimes you have to make leaps of logic. Like, for example, there's one case where you have a woman's, you know her maiden name, and you're trying to find information about her family, but you don't know anything else about her family. So you have to literally go through the directory and find all the people with that last name and knock on all their doors until you find someone who's a member of her family. Wow. Yeah. There's like times where, this person said, it took me 15 minutes to get from this location to this location. So you actually measure out on the map, and there's a time scale to figure out how long it takes them to get across town, if their alibi holds up or not. It's genuinely clever.
This definitely sounds like something that we would be interested in, especially considering I'm addicted to escape rooms. And DJ, what's that thing you got me? What company is it from for my birthday? I got
her a mysterious package company scenario to go through. We enjoyed the hell out of it, and that is right up. I mean, I saw the joy in her face as you were explaining it. So
yeah, it's definitely. I mean, the newer versions have slightly higher production values, and the props are not as ornate as those, but the flip side is each box comes with 10 cases. So it's basically, it has to have stuff that goes across all this, and then there's 3 boxes, and the core set is basically just 10 unconnected cases, but there's clever things like each one's in sequential order, in chronological order. So each of the newspapers, there's stuff you take all the newspapers from the earliest day to the day of your case. Sometimes there's stuff in earlier newspapers that relate to the case you're currently playing. And then for the 2 recent ones, there's a Jack the Ripper one, which actually has a 4-day case. So you actually play through the first day, get a certain amount of information, and then if you have the right information, you could then start day 2. Which gives you a new murder and a new book. And then the Queen's Park one that just came out has a similar 4-day one, but that one has additional difficulty of you only have so many turns before the day ends. You only have so many hours. So basically, like you have, I think it's like 12 turns. You can get max you can go through. Then you have to stop. So each one gets a little harder, but they're just genuinely, again, I find them to be very enjoyable, and it's something I found through my Sherlock Holmes fandom as opposed to through my game design work. But it's been something that's been very inspirational to me for the past 20 years since I've had copies of them.
Have you played those games alone in addition to with groups of people? Have you tried it both ways? Okay.
I've done both. Playing alone, it really comes down to when I played with people, it's great because you can talk and bounce ideas around. The flip side is basically how it works is one person decides where the group's going to go, and then when they read off the thing, and then the next person decides where they want to go. So sometimes you're like, no, we really need to go. Just got to do a piece of information. It's like, yeah, well, it's not my turn to go now, and they want to go somewhere else. And so the downside of working with people is you don't always have control where you go. Whereas solo play, you can do it all yourself. But even when I played solo, it's again only about a couple of hours, depending on how fast you read. The only caveat I would say is that these games were originally written in French. And the new games don't have a license to the original English translation. They had to retranslate the material. And some of the translations are not done to the level of quality I would expect. So occasionally there's just a bit like, what is that word? Or the sentence phrasing that sometimes makes it a little harder to figure out what's being said. So, I mean, but it's an extremely minor quibble. You know, I mean, otherwise it's a huge box full of text. I mean, so there's naturally going to be like typos, and, you know, a couple of errors here and there, but it's again, really, really strong game.
So do you speak any other languages since you've been to Europe?
No, I only speak English. The trip to Ireland was let's say back. My mom was originally born in England, but she was born in a U.S. Air Force base. So she has dual citizenship, British and American citizenship. So all my life I've lived in the U.S. In fact, I was originally born in Ohio. I now live in Atlanta, Georgia. Then my wife got a job in Dublin, Ireland early last year, and so originally moved there for her job. And again, Ireland's largely English speaking. There's a lot of people who speak Irish as well, but it's not as prominent as English speakers. So we were in the process of thinking about learning Irish because we were living there. And then for financial reasons, we ended up having to move back because without going into the politics of it, ultimately, rents are rapidly increasing in Ireland. And it's getting harder to find a good place to live there. You know, make your dollar stretch or your euro stretch as far as it needs to. So we just couldn't make the financial part of it work, which is why I moved back. So I only lived there for like 6 months. So I haven't lived in Europe all that long.
Okay. Well, because I asked because I deliver to a lot of Vietnamese people, so I started learning Vietnamese.
Oh, cool.
I know enough to have a very, very simple conversation. But I have two businesses that I converse with on a daily basis in Vietnamese, and they know that I'm learning, so they can't throw too many weird things out at me. But we today the beauty shop lady that I delivered to, who normally never speaks English to me unless there's something I don't understand, started out in English, and I kind of looked at her, and she's like, "Oh, whoops." And then the other thing I just explained to my wife the other night is that Vietnamese people don't speak quietly. Everything is at full volume. So every time I'm learning something new, I always want to do the whole English speaking thing, and I want to kind of enunciate it, but be not too loud so that not everybody in the world can hear me. They're like, "No, speak up. Everything is at full volume. There's no hiding here."
But I mean, that's the best way to learn is because, I mean, if you're doing it every day, then it's much easier than trying to learn out of the book. I mean, so if you have somebody to talk to, even if it's basic, it's a much better way of learning a language. We had a friend of ours who, in Ireland, everyone learns Irish as part of a school curriculum, but a lot of people, especially in the Dublin area, just don't bother after school. But we had a mate of ours who lived there who actually was born in what's called a Gaeltacht area, where it's predominantly Irish is the predominant language. And so he was a native Irish speaker, and Irish was his primary language. And so when we started learning, we were planning to work with him, to kind of talk with him every day, just to kind of, again, have that regular exposure to it. And also, like, the signs and the like are also both languages, so that would have also been helpful to, again, be immersed in it. Now that we're not there, it's like it's much harder to find people to talk to and to engage with. So it's hard to learn if you're not constantly using it.
So there's not a lot of Irish-speaking people in Atlanta, Georgia?
No.
That's so weird.
I have no trouble getting them to stop calling it Gaelic.
That's what is going to be my question is it like branched off of Gaelic, or?
I mean, yeah, Gaelic, as I understand it, Gaelic is the kind of root language, and then there's Scots Gaelic and Irish. And so if you say just Gaelic without context, well, I understand it's generally assumed that you're talking about Scots Gaelic. And I believe they still call Scots Gaelic the full Scots Gaelic, but I was many times told in Ireland, no, it's just Irish. It's like, okay, good job. The equivalent is like calling it Spanish French. You know, I mean, it doesn't make sense. It's a distinct language, even though there's a similar root.
Well, and I asked about the root because like French, German, Spanish, Portuguese, they all come from Latin.
Right. Yep.
So if you know one, you kind of know most of them, but it's completely different, obviously. So
I haven't actually talked to anybody who like knows one and goes to the area to try to use a language. But from what limited research I've done, it does seem like it's similar. Where it's like you might get certain words, certain inflections, certain conjugations might be roughly similar. But it is a distinct language from what I've heard.
I got taught at a business that I worked with by someone who was he was a Spanish speaker. He was from Spain, but every time we had questions about businesses, we were looking up because that's part of what we had to do. If it was in Portuguese or Italian or French, he could almost tell us word for word what the thing said without having a run it through a translator or anything. So
right,
he only knew Spanish.
Yeah, it's and I mean, again, I'm not a linguistic, but I mean, from what I understand, it's similar to like when you're looking at like South Africa English or British English or even Irish English, for that matter, where certain words and colloquialisms are maybe like, what does that mean? Especially when you get more familiar and more away from standards. You get like slang and lexicon. Then it gets harder to understand. But simple sentences, it's pretty easy to understand. No matter which part of the world you're getting your English from, I understand it's akin to that in the sense that it's, I recognize bits and pieces of that. I recognize how that should be going. The structure might be a bit off, but I generally understand what's going on. But again, this is all just kind of anecdotal, secondhand, chatting with mates in the pub about how this works, and they're going, we think it's like this.
I'm trying to use more English colloquialisms like that too, like mates and pubs, and I don't pronounce the crazy words like controversy or
aluminium,
but I'm trying to use like I've called people nutter a lot, and people look at me funny, but I'm like because of the Doctor Who thing, but yeah.
Yes, Ace. Oh yes, Ace. Yeah. Now, what's interesting?
Not pineapple. Do you want it?
Yes.
What's interesting is when I did go to Ireland, I similarly, it's like my mom. I grew up, around a certain amount of British slang. Watched a lot of British television. So I was like, I'm ready for this. And I got to Ireland, it's completely different. So when it came back, a lot of my I've been back for about 7 months now. And most of the slang and accent has fallen away. I apparently picked up a very slight accent, which is now gone. But the two things that still stuck with me weirdly are cheers instead of saying goodbye. I still say cheers. And also, thanks a million is very popular in the part of Ireland I lived in. It's everything was thanks a million. It's like, oh, about it, thanks a million, And so it's just things I picked up, Also, in Ireland, it's kind of hard. You don't just say goodbye. It's always cheers, thanks, yeah, thanks, okay, cheers, bye. Yeah, well, yeah, no, thank you, okay, cheers, bye. I mean, it's always like a sequence you have to go through for it to finally lead the conversation.
Yeah. So my wife and I are both from the same small Midwestern North Dakota town. Mm-hmm. I've been told I have no Midwestern accent whatsoever, and what I attributed that to is that every time I role play an ethnic background, I use that accent as close as possible without being offensive. Mm-hmm. So, like for instance, in the Navy, there was an Irish guy. He'd come over to this country, and apparently the provision that he was using to get his green card was he had to serve in the military. So he's from Dublin. Mm-hmm. And one day I walked up to him like, "Can I follow you around all day?" He's like, "Okay." And I was following around for a couple of hours before he turned and asked me, "What exactly are you after?" And I explained to him, and he's like, "Okay." He had a very standard, generic Dublin accent, but he could do all of the dialects. And I'm like, that's the one I want.
Right. Yeah. That's one thing I learned really quickly is like Dublin is kind of the what in England's called RP, received pronunciation, or the BBC accent. It's kind of the one that when you turn on the TV, people are probably talking, generally speaking, a Dublin accent. So you hear, that, and it's to our ears probably the lightest, a little easier to parse, and then you get like the further west and the further north, then it gets a little muddier, and the Cork accent in particular, I had some problems with. And I was just like, I think I know what you're saying, but I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, I learned things like you drop the th, so it's a 33 and a third, as opposed to 33 and a third.
That was the hardest thing to. In fact, I still have issues with it. I still want to use the th sound instead of the. But I know that's that because I listen to. So I'm a soccer fan, and for a while I was listening to the Northern Ireland Soccer League show, and that's where I caught on to that. They're not pronouncing the th in anything, so I started trying to pick up on that. But I mean, so. I caught that after I started listening to that podcast, but I mean the whole dialect thing. It's like I watch enough English soccer that I can tell what part of London you're from by your accent.
Wow. So
anyone that and sometimes I'm real close, but they're like, oh, you're just one little area over.
Yeah, I'm at the point where I can tell. Like rough quadrants. Like I could tell, basically, I could tell Belfast from Dublin from Galway, and kind of the rough quadrants. So I mean, I'm okay at that. Beyond that, it's like it's definitely Irish. But I mean, it's again, it was really interesting because, especially living there, because we were the people with the charming accent.
That's yes.
And we had people like going, could you just keep talking to me? It's like, wait, what? I don't have, my accent's terrible. I'm like, I'm in the Midwest. I'm basically 2 steps away from y'all. No, it's wonderful. It's like, all right.
While you were there, where did you travel to?
I actually didn't get to travel too much while we lived there. I went to Dragon Meet in London for a con. We went to Galway for a weekend. We went through Cork, but most of the time we actually lived in a town called Maynooth. Maynooth is how you pronounce it in America, but Maynooth is how it got pronounced there. And that was about 45 minutes west of Dublin. And that was like basically a college town. They had a university there that's been there for longer than we've had a country, and a church that's been there longer than we've had a country. Next to like the Tesco, which is a supermarket. We get on the train and go into Dublin. My wife took the train every day back and forth, and then over the weekend we'd go into Dublin and just go around. So we spent a lot of time mostly in Dublin, a little bit around Dublin, but. We weren't quite there long enough. We didn't get a chance to really settle in that you start properly traveling, sadly.
I think it's the situation where you have enough close to you to look at for that 6 months that you don't go you don't go outside the area a whole lot.
Right. Yeah. It's the, okay, while we're settling in, let's explore the area we're living in and get to know that. And then slowly make our way out to, like I said, we went to Galway kind of as a 3-day, get the heck away from the house for a weekend's trip. And then we had plans like, we'll go to see, we've been to England several times and been to the UK several times, but, we were planning to go see Belfast and then eventually, maybe go back to Scotland again and then possibly for the rest of Europe. But just, again, it's easy to get a plane or a boat or a train to mainland Europe, but it was just enough an inconvenience that wasn't quite worth our time. And sadly, we had to go before we could take advantage of it. I do regret that.
Any plans on going back, like to visit, or?
Oh yeah, I'll probably go back to visit. In fact, my roommate's going back to Dublin next week for business, and I can't go. And it's like, I want to go with you, but just can't make it work. But I know I'm definitely thinking. From a convention standpoint, I want to try to see if we can get like a UK Game Expo next year. There's a Dublin video game conference that's been picking up in recent years that I may try to hit next year because there's been a steady increase in the Dublin video game scene, which is the other part of my career is I do video game writing. And also, I mean, I've had some invites to like Germany and France. I had one invite to Italy. So I mean, like as finances make sense and as things work out, I definitely want to try to go do. If I could do it like in conjunction with business, it's like, oh yeah, I'll go for a con, and then take a few extra days on either side. You know, to kind of spend some time there, kind of work things out like that. I'm definitely hoping to do that, and my wife and I have been talking about going back there for a trip once we settle back here in the U.S. So I mean, I think we'll always have an appreciation, a part of us that likes being in Europe and likes having been in Europe. So I mean, it will never fall out of our lives, but it's just right now. It's like, again, you sell everything off, pack everything up, move, and then do it again 6 months later. It's like I'm kind of done with travel for a bit.
Yeah.
Feel
How is the gaming culture over in Ireland?
I'm sorry?
How is the gaming culture over in Ireland?
Really, really good, but from an American standard, it's a bit small. One of their bigger conventions, ScaleCon in Dublin, got a few hundred people, and that's reasonably sized for an Irish con. But that being said, there's like a decent con every 2 months there. I mean, but in the time I was there, I went to one con and I had the opportunity to go to two more. I just didn't have a chance to actually go to them. But I did go to GaleCon and spend some time there. And so there's a lot of, I'll travel to Cork and game with my Cork friends. And then 3 months later, they'll travel to come see me in Dublin, and then we'll game in there. And then all of us will go to Galway later, and then all of us go to Belfast. And there's a lot of also, obviously, because it's cheap flights, between the UK gaming scene and the Irish gaming scene, not just across the Belfast border, but also between the islands as well. So I mean, it's definitely very intimate. Lots of people. Which of course, being gamers is both good and bad, because everyone's personally invested. The one thing I noticed that was interesting to me in particular is I'm used to American conventions where there's games there, especially tabletop games. There's pre-reg. Usually you sign up, you get tickets or whatever, and then you go to the game. And at the Irish cons, it's much more you show up on the day and you grab a table. So there's a lot more of a pickup culture, and also a lot more people who would just show up on the day to run games too. They usually a program, but there's also like people just slap a sign-up sheet down and go, I'm going to run Ghostbusters now. It's like, all right, cool, let's play Ghostbusters, or whatever.
Is that because of the smaller attendance?
I don't know. I know that it's equivalent in the English gaming scene, at least, because when I went to Dragon Meet, I saw something similar, and I was like, is this European or is this specific to this kind of area? And my friends, Matthew Dawkins, kind of explained to me that some of it is the size, because the really big UK conventions, they do have some form of pre-reg. But the smaller ones is kind of much more show up on the day. But also, if I had to guess, I'd say some of it is my limited exposure was that the European gaming scene seems a little more experimental, not in applying things, but also just more, hey, I got this new game off the shelf, do you want to try it kind of thing. Also, definitely stronger in the sense of horror games are much more prevalent. So naturally, World of Darkness, but also lots of Call of Cthulhu and the like. And they also have a lot more, at least at GaleCon and at Dragon Meet, there are open table spaces where you can just kind of show up with a game and sit down and play. I've seen more of that in U.S. conventions in the past few years, kind of check out a board game and play it in a kind of board game space. But I did see a lot of that. Apparently, that's pretty common, from what I understand, in at least the Irish gaming scene, where just hey, just bring up a stack of games with you. Also, swaps. That's the other thing I found in the Irish gaming culture is, I just got into a Facebook group for the GaleCon, and people just started saying, "I have this for sale," and "I have this for sale," and I was asking about it. And apparently it's a really big thing, because rather than putting it into the post, because on post is not great sometimes. So what they'll do is, hey, we're all coming to this one space anyway. We all know each other anyway. So they'll just sell or trade games ahead of time and then show up with the games that are in bought or sold, switch the games around, switch money around, and then take another stack of games back. So a lot more of that.
We have we're the Portland Retro Gaming Expo out here, and I volunteer for all of the cons, and so I don't get to see a lot, I guess. I mean, I'm there the whole time, but I don't necessarily get to see a lot of what's going on. And I know that with retro gaming specifically, there are definitely large groups of swaps and
Really?
selling of games, like cartridge games, you know, like Nintendo's of all kinds and Segas and everything. And then they have there's a place here called Ground Control with pinball machines and
Oh wow.
What do you call those games? The cabinet or
cabinet, the stand-up cabinet game.
Right.
Okay.
Physical controls and the wooden,
Yeah, so they bring all of their games and they set it up as free play. And you've got this gigantic area where you just pay to get in, basically. And all the games are free play. And there's a bunch of people bring in Ataris.
Oh,
and they have these cute little setups all over that look like these, you know, 70s basements with a shag rug and, you know, a big console TV and all of this stuff set up. They do Tetris contests. They put it on the wall. They put the games on the wall and you can watch them from pretty much anywhere. And they have all of these tournaments and everything. And a lot of people apparently, and I don't know anything about this stuff either, but I guess you can program these older games easily or put a game into the cartridge easily. I guess I'm not sure exactly what it is, but
flashcards.
So oh, okay.
Yeah, actually, I know a little bit about this from the video game side, but there's an entire subgroup of not only that will they make their own games and put them onto cartridges so that you can use them, but also there's what they call ROM hacking, where they will take older games and rewrite them. So Nintendo games in particular apparently are pretty easy to rewrite. There's a lot of Nintendo era games, and so people will take a game, download the data, rewrite it, and put it back onto a different cartridge and use that. It's fascinating to me.
Yeah. So, and then they have a lot of people that have their own games that they're demoing, that they've programmed, and they have booths and stuff, and they have a lot of speakers, and they have a lot of YouTube celebrities that I'm clueless about.
Right.
I keep hearing about Peanut Butter Gamer, and I'm totally lost. But anyways, I guess these people those appeal to the younger crowd of people that come to these to the Retro Gaming Expo. The YouTube people are there for like the, I don't know, probably, you know, up to like 15-year-olds maybe. But then on the other hand, they have people who used to work for Atari come and and do panels every year also. And so that's a lot of fun. That happens in September, I'm pretty sure.
Oh wow!
And it's a three-day event. Well, 2.5-day event, and the free play, stays open like till midnight, and people can come in. And I want to say like a day is maybe $10. I mean, especially for the short night, for the first night, and they just have tons and tons and tons of gaming and all these panels. I mean, they have thousands and thousands of people that come to these things. So when you mention these smaller conventions with hundreds, I can imagine that's why it's a lot easier to kind of figure it out when you get there versus having to have everything completely set up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm used to. Well, I mean, I've been to cons of all size, but I mean, every year I'm going to conventions like Gen Con, which is like hundreds of thousands of people, every year for tabletop and role-playing games. And so it's like you don't go in there without a plan, kind of thing, And so like, and when for GaleCon the very first time, it was like, somebody was like, oh, hey, you're in town, you want to come? It's like, yeah, sure. And then like no information. And like the website with events didn't go up to like 3 weeks before. And I was just like, what is going on? And I thought, well, this con's really slow. And then I bet that's like, no, they're on top of it by having stuff up 3 weeks ahead of time. It's just like, again, just a completely different cultural thing. But it makes sense. I mean, if everyone kind of knows everybody, then you kind of go, oh, I'm gonna go there. I'm probably gonna hang out with this group of 6 people. Like when I was at Dragon Meet, we apparently this is fairly common too. The group rented an apartment. There was an apartment you kind of just rent out. It's a more formal version of something like
Airbnb is what I was going to say too.
Yeah, basically it's a little more organized and structured than that, but basically it's the same concept. And so again, apartments like the walking distance. So we go to the show, we hang out there for a few hours, and then like 4 or 5 of us all rented a place to sleep, and then we just went back to that place and gamed there all day. And I was like, shouldn't we go to the show? And it's like, oh, that's actually pretty common because the space isn't always available, and so people meet up at the show, hang out, look at the booths, whatever, figure out what games they want to play a couple games, and then go back and play off-site for several hours at a time. So that's another thing. It's like it get very ad hoc. It's the convention is kind of the excuse to get together and play the games. Okay.
I know that there's a lot, like I can think of KomuraCon especially, and I think the other one that I do, and what's the other one coming up? Rose City Comic-Con. They usually have board game sections set up and a bunch of tables and everything too, and they're usually
want to ask, since we don't have a tabletop role-playing game convention in Portland, what's the crossover like for other media other than tabletop RPGs, or is that it at an RPG con?
Oh god, no. I actually can't think of very many pure RPG cons. There's usually something else. So like it kind of depends. Like Gen Con has traditionally been a tabletop role-playing game, but even then it kind of started as a miniatures convention because that's where D&D evolved from. And even now there's like massive card game tournaments. There's several huge board game rooms, several board game vendors that show up there. Video games are starting to show up at Gen Con. PAX is start off as a video game convention, but starting to expand. And in fact, now PAX Unplugged is a largely tabletop convention, but still has some video game presence, from what I understand. So, I mean, finding a show that's just role-playing games is actually not easy, and most of those are pretty small. There's one in Atlanta here called AndoCon, which is almost entirely pure RPG. But again, it's like a few hundred people show up, then it's a relatively new convention. So there's a ton of crossover, and I think that's actually to the benefit of all sides. Because, like, role-playing games are an investment. I mean, you go to a show, most times you're sitting there for 3 to 4 hours playing just one game. And, especially as many of us get older, committing to several chunks of that gets harder and harder. So having things that are different timescales allows for some flexibility. So, like, okay, we're going to play Vampire the Requiem for 4 hours, then we're going to have lunch, then we'll play a board game for a couple hours, and then in the evening we'll play Wraith the Oblivion, and then we'll go to bed or go drinking or whatever. And that seems pretty common. And also pickup games are not unusual. But again, most when I went to Gen Con, I was going to game with a bunch of friends of mine. A couple people fell through, so I ended up playing card games instead of a tabletop role-playing game because those were available and it was a nice fill-in. So I mean, there's a ton of crossover.
Okay, because like I said, I mean, we've never been to a con before. Was Wizard World was the first one, or Rose City?
Yeah, it would have been Wizard World because that was at that time it was in April. No, sorry, no, we did go to Rose City Comic-Con.
So so Comic-Cons are what I have the experience of. I have gone to things she's volunteered at, but like the Kumura Con is anime, and I'm not into the things that those people are into.
Right, but I mean, gaming is much like how gaming and tabletop games have grown to expand other media. I'm seeing the reverse. Again, in Atlanta, there's a big anime convention called MomoCon, and it's predominantly anime, but it has started to slowly grow a tabletop track, and a video game track, and an RPG track. They're not huge. For again, it's a 10,000-ish person convention off the top of my head. And so there's only like maybe 50 to 100 people playing tabletop role-playing games, but they are there. I went to Fan Expo in Canada a couple of years ago, and that's Comic-Con-ish. It's celebrities, it's panels predominantly. But again, they had a decent RPG track and tabletop board game track. So, I mean, more of that is happening, and more people are coming because again, it's becoming crossover, particularly now with things like Critical Role, where there are people who are engaging in tabletop games in the same way that they engage with things like Doctor Who or anime or whatever. They're watching it on a screen. And so there's a lot more sense of, okay, this makes sense to overlap, is to, sell these books that people are watching the game of on the screen and the like. Or get people together to get a sense of what it's like to play the thing that they have been watching, in the same way that what is it like to wear a costume of the character I like on screen. There's increasing amount of overlap as the lines just get blurrier, which is something I personally find fascinating. I think it's great that this stuff's getting blurrier and muddier, and people have more chances to experience different things, because sometimes when conventions are heavily siloed, that's when things get toxic, in my experience. And it's like, we are just this group and we don't talk about anything else. Going back to Sherlock Holmes, for example, there's been a con here called 221B Con, which started a few years ago. I went to the first one. And it was just Sherlock Holmes convention. That's all they did. The company that has put together a series of fandom conventions, but this is the first Sherlock Holmes one they did. But even that was fascinating, because you have people who are extremely young, largely inclusive LGBTQ community, and they're there for BBC Sherlock. They're there for Elementary, the extremely new young versions of the show. And then people in their 60s and 70s are showing up because they prefer the classic canon, and they want to talk about how the original material was presented. People like the Baker Street regulars, and putting them in the same space and watching them going, we love this one thing in common. We're coming at it from such different angles, but they got to appreciate the other side. I did a talk at that one, and she was talking about the original canon in the context of things like Elementary and Sherlock. And basically, it was let me explain all the inside jokes to you kind of panel. When they're doing this stuff, here's the stuff in the original stories they're referencing. And so people who had never read the original books are like, oh my God, I got to find these now. And say, well, they're free. They're in public domain. Go find them. And leads to fascinating conversations, like someone getting mad at me because I spoiled the ending of a story that was published 125 years ago. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure the spoiler statute of limitations is expired on this one.
By like 75 years, yes.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's like, even the most liberal interpretation of spoiler warning, it's like, no, we're too far gone. But again, I mean, that was within a fandom. But basically, it was a understood fandom, but it's actually much more bifurcated and diverse than even I think the people at the show realized. And I'm seeing the same thing at gaming conventions, is because gaming is such now an all-inclusive term, means so many different things. It's like someone playing retro Nintendo cartridges when they weren't even around when Nintendo was a thing. Being in the same space as people who are playing war games since the 60s when Avalon Hill was a big thing, in the same space as people who play live action games and dress up in costumes, and that weird intersection they have with cosplay, having them all in the same space and going, hey, your thing is cool too, I think really helps everybody. So I'm a huge fan of conventions that take multiple options and kind of put them in the same space and go, check new things out, live outside your zone, because I think that helps all of our communities when that happens.
Oh, North Dakota doesn't have cons. I know that'll shock you. So like DJ said, our first ever has been since we've lived in Portland. And I'm not like I volunteer a lot out here, I guess. And so I volunteer for stuff that I may not have any interest in. So like for KimuraCon, for example, it was something I didn't know anything about, but I enjoy volunteering, and so I did that, and I think I've been there for 2 or 3 years now, and so I get to know a little bit more of it, or there's like every year I recognize maybe one more character than the year before. Like I got to come home and tell DJ that one of the Voltron people, like I recognized them at the show.
Oh,
I was so proud of myself. But I do that, and like I said, the Retro Gaming Expo out here is a lot of fun. There's several Comic Cons. There's Heroes and Villains Fan Fest, which is Walking Dead and like the CW hero shows, like oh, and the one thing I wanted to ask you about, since you artwork, since you're in Atlanta, Georgia, is one of our favorite artists is Andy Runton.
Okay.
And he is from Georgia.
Okay.
And he came up to Portland at that first con that we ever went to, and unfortunately he's never come back, but we met him there, and he was a really nice guy. And then he draws a series called Owly.
Okay.
And it's really just artwork. There's no dialogue to it. You just figure out the dialogue based on what he draws. And so then at Retro Gaming Expo, I was helping this couple get into a panel after it had started, and I noticed on the guy's arm he had an Owly tattoo, and I go, oh my God, it's an Owly tattoo. And he goes, oh my God, you know who Owly is. So that was one of those, instant connection type situations that you get.
Those are always cool, especially. I mean, and I will say that I don't know the artist in question, sadly, but I do know how cool it can be to find someone who really connects with what you're working on. I've had people give tattoos of icons or groups that I've worked on or helped to design, at least the fiction behind. And it's always like, you put that on your body, and I've worked on that. That's
forever.
Weird. Yeah, it's cool, but also a little strange, because it's like that was in my head, and now it's on you.
Yeah.
So I've been thinking while I've been waiting. Is Scion owned by Onyx Path?
Yes. So actually, if you want to break down kind of how it all works. So currently, the World of Darkness, Chronicles of Darkness, and Exalted are all licensed from White Wolf. Those are, from what I understand, there are other properties that they have acquired, but I don't know the details on what I know those three, they do own Onyx Path licenses from them to make tabletop role-playing games. When Onyx Path was formed, it purchased outright Scion and the Trinity Continuum, which includes Aeon, Aberrance, and Adventure. And then they along with another company, jointly purchased the Scarred Lands, which were the D&D 3rd edition materials that were put out by White Wolf at the time. The other party, Stewick, sadly passed away very suddenly last year, and so now we bought the other interest of it, and so now we completely own Scarred Lands as well. Then there are games like my game Pugmire, which is actually owned by me, and I have, for lack of a better term, licensed Onyx Path to make the tabletop role-playing game version of it. We're actually working together, and it's much more muddier in terms of the creative process. But from a legal perspective, it's identical. We licensed that from, they licensed it from my company, Pugsteady, to make a tabletop game. And we also just finished up a draft of Dystopia Rising, which is licensed from a different company called Echelon Media. Dystopia Rising is a post-apocalyptic live-action group, and they wanted to do a new version of their tabletop game. So that's another license agreement. So there's lots of games that Onyx Path are publishing. Some of them are licensed by companies, including White Wolf, the new White Wolf. Some of them are owned outright by Onyx Path, and some of them are creator-owned that are kind of produced jointly, like the ones that I like Pugmire. And just recently, we started talking about They Came From Beneath the Sea, which is a game that, for lack of a better term, is a new Onyx Path owned property. So Onyx Path now owns this new game that they're making that wasn't previously a White Wolf property.
And I know about that game because the role-playing game podcast I listened to, a bunch of people went to a con where Matthew was apparently making noises a lot. Yeah. So
he does it all the time. I mean, he can't help it.
Well, the reason I asked about Cyan, because I wanted to use references here that you guys owned so that this worked better. So have you seen Will Wheaton's Titan's Grave production for YouTube?
I have not seen it. I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it.
So it was basically they ran it in like 2 days, but stretched it out into 12 episodes. They had a writing team behind it. They had an artist specifically dedicated to it. They had a set, all that. But the important part is a good marketing tool would be to recreate that type of thing where you're like running Pugmire for a specific group of 4 people in a very specific story to kind of introduce people that might be hesitant into this game system, and then kind of giving them a little flavor in the world too.
Oh, I mean, we would love to do that. The of course, money is the big issue because we don't have Will Wheaton money. We don't have Geek and Sundry money. I mean,
that's why. I mean, that's why I'm saying, there's not going to be a team of writers. But it may take place over a longer period, and maybe a little bit more off the cuff. But I mean,
we are looking at options like that. Like, we did do Geek and Sundry did do a 4 episodes run of Pugmire back when the Kickstarter started. And so I worked with them a little bit to kind of help them out with that. But that was pretty hands-off. I was like, hey, you guys do what you think is awesome. And we are reaching out to other streamers and the like to actually, because we do want people like going, hey, we'll promote you guys if you run a game of this, to get people aware of it. So it's definitely a space where we're trying to move into. And we're also trying to do stuff like get Roll20 and Fantasy Grounds resources up so people can more easily stream their games if they have pre-made assets using our properties. So I mean, it's something we're trying to explore. Right now, we're doing stuff that's within our wheelhouse a bit more. Like we just put out an interactive YouTube series for Pan's Guide to Pugmire. So basically, it's like we got audio narration, and you can make some choices. It's like Pan wants to fight the spiders. Click here. If you want Pan to do this, click here. And it kind of gives you very simple explanation of the rules. Like here's how dice rolls work. It's not a comprehensive rule set, but gives you a sense of basics. And it also gives you kind of a rudimentary choose your adventure style story through all the videos. So you could play that in like 15 minutes and gives you a basic idea of what a tabletop role-playing game might be like. So I mean, we're looking into stuff like that, and of course with the Onyx Pathcast, if that continues to do well, then we've talked about things like maybe us getting together, doing a 4-hour session, then cutting it up into like 4 1-hour episodes that we could release through a podcast stream. So I mean, we're definitely wanting to explore those areas, and stuff like Titan's Grave and Critical Role are definitely pointing the way. And I know that the new Geek and Sundry Alpha stuff, where again they have elaborate sets and people are in costume. I mean, it's stuff. It's just amazing, fantastic stuff. If we can find the right partner to do stuff like that, we definitely want to explore it. It's just been, when D&D is a huge brand, and that's a great place to start. And then something like, a Star Trek role-playing game comes out again. That's a huge property. So right now, the really big properties are getting a lot of attention, and understandably. Even Titan's Grave, I mean, that's still fairly traditional fantasy. Even though it's not a D&D system, it uses Green Ronin's age system, but still, I mean, it's a fairly traditional fantasy setting. So it's going to get a lot more attention just because it's something that people recognize. The stuff that Onyx Path makes is, I think, very, very cool, but also not as easily summarized. I mean, like, how do you summarize? You play a dead person and also somebody else's evil consciousness in their head. It's not a zippy, pitchy, kind of concept to pitch right people in.
But I mean, so if we're using like the main, like the White Wolfy connected stuff too, like everybody would kind of be able to connect with a vampire situation if that was run too. But I just thought that it would be neat to if Onyx Path used that. I mean, the way you presented the answer there made me think, man, I wish I had the money to produce something for you guys, because it would be awesome.
Right. I mean, and that's the one thing is that tabletop role-playing games is not an industry that makes a ton of cash. I mean, the margins are better than they were 5 years ago. I mean, people say how about role-playing games are dying. In fact, I think they are on an upswing, again, particularly in the wake of 5th edition and events like the Geek and Sundry really embracing tabletop role-playing games. But even before that, there was an upswing. But we're still talking, a good sales run on a game is like 5,000 or 10,000 copies. Whereas, a bad run of comic books would be like 10,000 copies. I mean, so the scale is just different. I mean, we're selling functionally coffee art books. So those are $50 a pop. And tabletop role-playing games take a certain amount of investment both to start and to run. You have to spend a lot of time reading them, making characters. It's awesome, but it's also an investment of time. So it's harder to sell as other entertainment becomes more easily accessible. It's one of the reasons why I think watching and listening to actual plays has become backward, because it's like being in the game without all the prep. So if I don't have a group around or I don't have time, but I still want to kind of feel like I'm involved with the game, I can toss up an episode of Critical Role on YouTube and watch that and go, okay, I'm getting a D&D-like experience. So I am definitely with you in the sense that it makes sense for us to kind of move into the area, and when it's something we're exploring. But you have to find people who are the intersection of technical capability, able to put together an engaging product and maintain an engaging product, and also interested in the stuff we make. And there's some people who fit all those criteria, but it's just kind of getting it all. And on top of all of that, like you say, of a lot of people who fit all those criteria, most of them, for nostalgic purposes or preferences, are going to want to talk about World of Darkness or Chronicles Darkness, which is fantastic. We make those games too, but from a business perspective, obviously, we're going to want to try. We also would like to have the stuff that we own or have a direct investment in that line as well. So it may be a case where we start looking at helping out with a vampire product because that's a very popular, strong brand. And then, okay, now we've done that. Now can we do Scion? Can we do Trinity? Can we do Pugmire? Whatever.
I was really interested in Scion when it came out, but it came out at a weird point to where I had a group that immediately dissolved after that. So I got access to some books for a little while, but I didn't get access to all of them. So I only know little tidbits here and there. And that would be the one thing most World of Darkness-y that I would want to see played out in a large scale. Not that I don't, I mean, I love the concept of Pugmire, but both my wife and I think, are really waiting for Monarchies of Mao, because we're cat people.
No, totally. And Monarchies of Mao just, the draft of the PDF went out to Kickstarter backers, so that's pretty soon.
We're not all necessarily cat people. I mean, after all, I have a dog treat business.
Well, yeah. But
see?
Huh?
Okay. You lied to me.
I was misinformed.
But we own a cat. We don't own a dog.
No. You're owned by a cat.
Yes. Yes, we are her staff.
Right.
I also serve 2 guinea pigs.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, the cat one, DJ, I haven't looked that up at all, but I have that fetch quest.
Okay.
up on my iPad, and so I want to know if you have or had a pug.
Oh yes. In fact, we've had 3 in our lives, and technically a fourth. We were a foster for a fourth. But in fact, all 3 of our pugs are in the backstory of Pugmire. So the original founder of Pugmire is King Vincent, which is our oldest pug. And then, of course, King Puckington was our first dog. And then his brother, which is Seneschal Murrah, is those are all based off of 3 pugs that we have owned in the past. And in fact, our last one actually passed away while we were living in Ireland. But we've been talking about getting another one at some point. We're in an apartment right now, so we want to wait till we get into a house because, even though pugs are not exactly energetic creatures, still in an apartment it's just a bit too small. So getting a nice house with a yard we can actually play in. But absolutely, no, we're definitely a pug people. In fact, I have a little knit pug someone made of one of our characters, Yosha Pug, Princess Yosha Pug.
That's actually crocheted, but that's only because I do that I know.
Fair enough. I see. But yeah, no, we've been both cat and dog people. I mean, so that's one of the reasons why I wanted to make when I did Pugmire, I wanted to make sure there was a separate cat game because I knew there are people who are like, that's cool, but I'm a cat person. And also I want to make sure it was a distinct game because there are differences. Like, Pugmire is pretty straight up. It's high fantasy, very kind of English myth style Robin Hood. We're going to get together and get a party and go off and do things. Monarchy's Mouse is much more kind of Renaissance Italy. So there's politics. There's a little more intrigue. They're still getting together and going off and fighting monsters and trying to solve problems. I mean, they're still good cats. But also, if they can make things a little better for themselves, as opposed to everybody else, that would be even better. So I felt it was important to kind of get those 2 different experiences, right? So that's why the game's completely crossover. You can play characters from both in the same game. And even with Fetch Quest, one of the stretch goals we hit for, I just talk about that. Fetch Quest is a card game we're putting out in the world of Pugmire. That's a cooperative deck building card game we just kickstarted. And of course, because it starts from Pugmire, the 6 characters are dogs, but one of the stretch goals we hit was having 6 cat characters. So you can just swap the cat characters in and play with the exact same cards, but the abilities they have means that the play is a little different, whereas the dog cards are much more, I'm going to help you do this thing, and you're going to help him do a thing, and he's going to help me do a thing. And the cat cards are much more like, I'm going to do something awesome, and screw all y'all.
Right.
But I'm really cool right now. So it's just a different style of play, but it's just a simple, switching a few cards, you get a slightly different feel, but it allows people who really love cats to be able to have that experience as well.
Very cool. I'm actually, the whole show I've been sewing cat toys.
Yay.
So yeah, my business is all, pretty much pet related, so I'm very into dogs.
I have no idea what that's like.
And guinea pigs.
I'm trying.
Oh, I was just gonna say quick. My business started because we ended up with a Pomeranian.
Cool.
In 2002, we got a little Pom, and so he was the inspiration for my business. So.
Yeah. To be fair, I mean, same for me. When I got laid off from video games, and I worked for myself, and I was like, I had to sit in my office all day. It was just me and the dogs, and then I drew a lot of inspiration from them, and frankly, support from them when I started doing my own business stuff. So,
Well, she's done the dog treat business. I've kind of centered myself around either creating entertainment things, like I'm trying to write, and I really want to make a comic book, but that's turning out to be a terrible thing to be able to finish. But I also learned that I can create role-playing games using other people's stuff, like bullet journals. So there's that.
I mean, especially with game design, I feel like
hard.
It is, but a lot of people start from derivation, and I think it's a natural place to start. It's like, how do I make this game I love better? How do I make this thing I like into a game? That's a natural starting point for design, and then you build and tweak and grow, and eventually start making new and different stuff. But philosophically, I find that innovation in game design is disproportionately rated. A game that uses existing design extremely well, generally, in my experience, is better regarded than a game that does something innovative, kind of okay. So learning how to take an existing thing and make it better is actually closer to, because really a lot of game design is, I want to make a thing. I put in all the stuff I think is going to make it work, and then I start subtracting the stuff that's not working. And then you keep doing that, and eventually you have a game. So the idea of I'm going to sit down and make a game and it completely forms and works exactly the first time is not at all how it works. I mean, when I first worked on Fetch Quest, it was, okay, I want to do a card game. Okay, it's Pugmire. So what is that going to be? Well, one of the key concepts of Pugmire is that I don't want it to be the concept is cooperative. You know, dogs work together. I love player versus player style games, but Pugmire is not one of those properties. There's a ton of that. So it's going to be a cooperative game. Okay, well then right there I have some concept. It's got to be a card game. I don't have room for any components because of the design is going for us. Okay, well then I can't use a board. I can't use dice. It's all got to be in the cards. And so that starts to help me narrow down. And then it's looking at games that are like the things I want to make. It's like, okay, you know, I want to make a cooperative game. Well, deck builders seem pretty common in the cooperative space. So let's look at the Dresden Files game. Let's look at Starcore. Let's look at you know, some of the other games that are competitive deck builders. Some of the games are cooperative but not deck builders. And let's take bits and pieces of those. And so I made a couple of versions of it that were basically this game but with dogs. And then okay, what works about that? What doesn't work about that? And then let's make a different version of what works about that, and then take all the pieces that work and jam those together, and then start to refine and make sure they all fit. I mean, so taking existing design, doing things like house rules for Monopoly, even, you know, stuff like that, is extremely valid way to figure out how it works, because a lot of it is trial and error. I mean, you can do some statistical analysis, you can do some math to try to figure out how things work. I don't rate that too strongly. There's a validity for statistical modeling, and people who could do that, I'm genuinely envious of. But also, people have to parse this stuff. And if people at the table aren't getting what your statistical model is trying to do, then it's not helpful. If you have a good experience at the table, and then there's strong math to back it up, that's the sweet spot, you know. But you start from, we know this thing works. How can we improve that? Why is this improvement working the way it should? Why is, I made this change I thought would work, and now it's not. Why is that not working? By doing that kind of stuff and learning from it, it's just like writing. It's like you try something and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and you just keep trying and you know, you do a little better, you do a little better. I mean, you know, I always think of Adventure Time. It's like, before you're good at something, you have to suck at it. And it's the truth. So, I mean, you know, taking something like, hey, I've made a role-playing game from Bullet Journal. That's something no one's done before, and it's really cool. But also you can start to say, okay, what is it about Bullet Journal that leads to a compelling gaming experience? What is it about this thing that people want to play and think it's fun? Okay, can I make a game using what I've learned from that in a different place? And how do I build on that?
That'll be the next step.
Yeah. I mean, and so you're going to make a bunch of stuff. And if you're anything like me, you're going to have 2 really cool game ideas and 55 broken carcasses littering on the road towards those 2 great game designs.
Probably. I have an elaboration question. We don't play a lot of games. So when you say deck building, do you get all the cards and you build a deck from all of those, or?
No, that's a good point. So when I say deck building, it's a genre of game that's come out relatively recently. But the idea is that during the course of the game, you acquire cards through gameplay that then add to your personal deck. So like, for example, with Fetch Quest, each dog character, your dog pioneer, you have a starting deck of six cards. There are mind cards, skill cards, and war cards. So, of course, the magic user character starts off with more mind cards than war cards because she's going to cast spells and think of cool things to do. Whereas the bulldog warrior, he's going to have more war cards than mind cards because he's a big tough guy. He's not so much with the thinking. So each person they have the 6 decks, and you play those cards. But then during the course of gameplay, there's what's called a fortune deck, and there are some cards face up that as you defeat things in the game, you draw cards as rewards, and those get into your hands. And so as you play them and discard them, they naturally get added to your deck. And so you build your deck slowly through gameplay. So if you're playing, and you can pick up any card you want to, but the kind of immediate obvious strategy is, well, there are cards that give me more mind stuff, and I'm good at mind stuff, so I should probably get more. The wizard should probably have more cards that involve minds. The thief should probably have more cards that involve skills. So I'll tend to take those cards. And then on top of it, each of the 6 characters has a keyword. And what a keyword means is that certain cards have a moderate amount of investment, but they have an additional benefit if played by a character with that keyword. So you're going to try to get the really powerful cards to that specific character that can use it. So a part of the game design is that you're not only taking cards and putting them into your deck, but as the game evolves, you want to get to specific cards faster. So you're also trying to then get rid of excess and least useful cards, either by giving them to other players or removing them from the game. So the design is, it's a bit like the Magic the Gathering style of making a deck and then pruning it down to just things it's working on, but that all happens during gameplay as opposed to outside of it.
And that's been my disconnect, is I've played Magic the Gathering, but that's a collectible card game where you buy all the cards. But
right.
Fetch Quest would have everything ready to go. It's just build the deck as you go. See, so
you buy the box, and then as you play, you build up your deck in a way that makes sense. And then next time you play the character, different cards may come up, and you may not be able to make the deck the same way. So it's. Imagine if each game was opening 5 boosters of Magic cards and trying to make the best deck out of it. It's kind of the same idea, where you're taking whatever cards show up and trying to make the best possible immediate hands and long-term deck based on the cards that come available through gameplay.
All right, hun. Let's put an order in on that.
I want the wallpaper and the pins. I want pins.
Yeah, the Kickstarter ended, but we do have a backer kit. So, the backer kit, we do have. I believe if you click on the, there's a button there that says pre-order or backer or something like that. If you go to that, then you can pre-order the box set. I believe the pins are still available, stuff like that. So yeah, you can get some of them certainly.
Another thing that I see. Okay, so first of all, I signed up to your newsletter for free stuff because.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. And then under this Buy My Work tab here, I see Tunnels and Trolls Adventures.
Yes.
I beta tested that.
Really?
I think.
Yeah. the mobile game?
Yes, they were a booth at Retro Gaming Expo a couple of years ago, and they had they had tablets, and they had headphones and a bunch of little chairs, and you could sit and play the game. And I mean, I'm totally clueless. I died. I got to put my little tick mark on the board underneath what kind of death I got with everyone else. Does that sound familiar, DJ?
Yeah, that's the game you showed me that you wanted me to play, but I didn't play. So, okay, I know what she's talking about.
We played a game of it on a podcast. The group of us did.
Oh, wow.
Because I had it on my iPad, and I was reading everything and showing the screens, and then the guys, we were all figuring out what direction we wanted to take each time it gave us an option. And I'm pretty sure we ended up with arrows in our back every time too. Yes. But we really did well together. It was probably the best I ever did on that game. And so I was really shocked to see that on this list, because we keep realizing how small the world really is through our connections. And Yeah, so I had that as a beta, and then we played it a few
Cool.
times. So
Yeah, I worked on the I helped them with the initial system design on that in terms of game system, not code or technological system. And then earlier this year / later last year, I went through them to kind of like help rewrite some of the initial adventures to get it, move from a tabletop role playing game adventure to something that works on a mobile screen. But yeah, I mean the app is, I know the app is available now through Android and iOS. It's free to play. You could buy certain adventures, you want to play them over and over again, or you could play a certain number of times a day. You will die a lot, but you won't die nearly as much as in the beta. We worked on that.
that's good, because it was I remember one time, one of the games that I played, I'm sitting there creating my character, and then the first thing I did, I died.
Yeah.
So I spent way more time creating my character than I did living.
Yeah, no, that was an extremely hard adventure, and that's one of the things we talked about. Now there's an entire path that leads you up to that adventure, so I can there's easier adventures in front of that, and that's one of the things we worked on, stuff like what the experience point curve is, and what the down to dice and points. I mean, so a lot of my work was specifically that kind of tweaking design, like we were talking about earlier. Is okay, now that we've got the rough game, let's start pulling stuff away and revising it, so that way there's a natural progression. So that was a lot of spreadsheets and discussion, but yeah, it is a small world. I mean, this is a small industry. A lot of us know each other, and that's one of the things I love about working in this, is that I can go to a show and go, hey, it's so and so. I mean, I've gotten to work with some amazing people, like Dave Grossman, for example. I mean, he's a guy who worked on The Adventures of Monkey Island back in the 90s. He worked on Maniac Mansion and video games. He helped found Telltale Games. This guy's a legend, but I got to work with him, learned some amazing stuff with him. With him, I got to work on a game based on Futurama and work with one of the writers from the Futurama TV show. It's just crazy how small this industry is.
Do you find that there are certain areas of the U.S. or certain states or cities that are more centered? Like for example, when we came out to Portland, we find out that Dark Horse Comics is out here, and Brian Michael Bendis is out here,
and now Image
so
Comics is also out here. So this is the second largest comic book city in the nation.
I believe it.
So
definitely the West Coast. There's a lot of it out there. In fact, most of my clients are either on the East Coast or the West Coast, because I work I'm a freelancer. I mean, so a lot of my work is I work for other people as a contractor, and a lot of my clients are East Coast, West Coast, and particularly challenging when, as I talked about earlier, when I was living in Ireland and there was an 8-hour time difference. Things get really tough for the West Coast people. But in terms of board games and tabletop games, the Midwest actually has a fairly large showing. And my gut on that is that it's all started coming in Wisconsin. Lake Geneva is where TSR started and where tabletop role playing game kind of grew up. And even then, though, that stemmed from tabletop historic miniature gaming, which is also very popular in the Midwest. And I think part of that is because it's relatively cheap entertainment. So you don't have to, you can spend, now in modern day money, 30, 40, $50 in a game, but you can play it for hours and days. It's not like you spend $50 for 2 people to go to the movies. It seems like these days, but 2 tickets and food, it's $50 right there. Whereas $50 for a board game, you can play that for a very long time. And so in the Midwest, where the cost of living is a little bit lower, it's more value for money, and also cheaper for businesses with small margins to operate because cost of living is lower. The amount of money you make in role-playing games, you can get a small house in, say, Pittsburgh, but not in San Francisco. So
can you do anything to get a house in San Francisco?
My wife got a video game job offer in San Francisco, and we started looking at housing prices, and it's just like, we can't. It's ridiculous. And frankly, Dublin's starting to get that bad too. Another reason why we had to leave. So I mean, but I mean, the West Coast in particular, because media is becoming so homogenous, movie studios are out there, and like I say, comic book studios moving out to the West Coast, and book publishers. East Coast has predominantly been book publishing. New York is like the center for book publishing for a very long time, but TV, also television networks were based in New York. But as that grows, that gets muddier. Here in Atlanta, Georgia, past 8 or 9 years, they've been offering a very good tax program for media companies, specifically for video games and for movie studios. So like huge chunks of the last Avengers movie was shot here.
Yeah, I noticed Georgia on the credits at the end. It's always that peach in Georgia.
Right, that's the thing. Is you want the tax credit, you have to show the thing on because the idea is, oh hey, it's basically advertising at the end of all of these things. The video games, you'll see sometimes the opening of video games, you'll see the Georgia peach because there's some pretty strong video game studios here. So that's that's starting to grow, and so there is kind of a southern media that's starting to kind of grow up recently. Detroit's starting to get people because again, it's super cheap land in Detroit. So startups that need a place to set up and can't afford to go to the East or West Coast, they can go somewhere like Detroit. All their employees can work remotely or whatever, and set up shop there. So I mean, it's starting to change. But traditionally, it has been for the bigger media, East and West Coast, for the smaller, more niche hobby industries, the Midwest.
I know that most of the RPG-centric podcasts are from the Midwest.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, Dan from Fear the Boot made the joke that if someone nuked St. Louis, you would take out 90% of the RPG podcasts on the internet.
Yeah, if someone nuked Ohio, I'd probably take out about half of the RPG industry.
It's terrible.
Wow. Yeah. I used to live in St. Louis actually, but
I kind of like the idea of St. Louis because I'm also I play chess a lot, and St. Louis has recently become the chess capital of the United States. So
I didn't know that.
Most of the big name players are moving to St. Louis because the St. Louis Chess and Scholastic Center, which is their main chess facility, is really putting on some good shows, and they're putting out money. The Rex Sinkfield is the guy that owns it, and he's throwing money at chess all over the place. So everybody wants to be around him because he's doing good things.
That's cool. I had no idea.
I just want to let you know, DJ, I don't want to live there.
I don't want to move back to the Midwest either. So
I thoroughly enjoy Portland.
Yeah,
I've heard good things about Portland.
It's we came out here because there's more open-mindedness and acceptedness of things that aren't mainstream. Where we came from, I just described it to somebody today too as it's hard right, super Christian people that refuse to accept any dissenting opinions at all.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So we moved from one extreme to a middle ground, which has been great. But I was going to say something, and I've been completely derailed, and my mind went. I'm getting old, but that's great.
I know.
I have split loyalties now, but I'm an Atlanta Falcons fan from a long time ago.
Okay. I don't follow American football, sadly.
Oh.
And it's specifically as a qualifier because, I mean, for a long time I was like, I don't follow sports. I mean, I grew up in Ohio. So my sports teams were the Cleveland Browns or the Cleveland Cavaliers. So really didn't, and the Cleveland Indians. So it's just like, I shouldn't even bother following sports. They're all going to lose. So for a long time, I just didn't follow professional sports. And then, now I watch some professional wrestling, which is sports entertainment. But recently I've really gotten into rugby. Actually, Ireland got me hooked on rugby. So I've been following that a lot more. But I still haven't quite picked up the taste for American sports.
And my wife can attest to this. I used to be really into professional wrestling. But I kind of fell out after, I don't know. I don't think I've been watching. I watch a show every once in a while, but I haven't really watched a lot since I want to say like 2010. Does that sound right?
It's been quite a while, yeah.
Yeah. And what I noticed is the same thing that old school wrestling fans that used to tell me stuff is the same thing happened with me, is that I stopped liking the way it evolved into what it is now. So, I mean, I understand why they're doing what they're doing, but it just doesn't appeal to me.
So if you like the slightly older school, like clear heroes and villains kind of thing, and the slightly over the top storylines, might want to check out a show called Lucha Underground.
Okay.
It's on the El Rey Network, but it is it's the AAA Mexican Wrestling Federation has working with the El Rey Network to do an American show. But what's fascinating about it is that, first of all, it's very lucha libre. So there's the Rudos and the heel, good guys and bad guys, but also it's shot like a crime noir story that also happens to involve things like manifested gods and people coming back from the dead and angels, like you do. So it's kind of like Scion as a wrestling show, really. It's just delightfully bonkers, and it's paced like a TV show, which is interesting. It's not like people go in, they wrestle, and then there's vaguely a storyline. There's actually plot threads that go on for several episodes, and sometimes the people in the ring don't probably know what's going on with the plot line. It's a very different take on wrestling that's draws much more from how episodic television is written these days. But it has, again, that lot of over the top. Like one of the characters is Mil Muertes, the 1,000 deaths, and so he literally comes back from the dead every time. I mean, it's Undertaker's level of bonkers, but it's a lot of fun. The conceit is it is an underground wrestling ring run by a guy who just likes violence, and he's very over the top. And the actor playing him originally starred in telenovela soap operas in Mexico. I mean, so he just totally gets the right level of camp in terms of pitching it. It's a fun show. If you like the older style of wrestling, you may appreciate it. The first two seasons are on Netflix, actually, too.
Really?
Yeah.
No.
At least it was last I checked. Let me double check right now.
Okay. Because I was kind of poking my nose into Chikara Pro, which looks interesting too.
Chikara is similar. It doesn't have the same production values or the working plot line, but it has a lot of the guys who worked in Chikara, some of them come over to Lucha Underground, so you'll see a lot of similar stuff.
And the thing that caught my attention with Chikara is he was on a podcast that I wouldn't have expected a wrestling personality to be on, and I was listening, and he explained the storyline behind one of their seasons where they basically pretended that Chikara broke up and all these people were wrestling in independent things, and that there was this big fan movement to get everything back, and then he was going to swoop in and start a new Chikara Pro or something like that and built the company back up, and that was a storyline the whole time, and he's like, it was a big risk, but we pulled it off.
Yeah, Chikara, they do lots of season writings, so like they'll do stuff like that too. But they also have like actually some of the Chikara guys have since gone to WWE. So like there was a character called El Generico who was like the generic luchador. But now he's Sami Zayn at WWE, and it's like a moderately big star at WWE.
I know who that is.
Yeah. So I mean, so some of the Chikara guys, have grown up and gone to the big leagues. But yeah, Chikara just has, again, similar bonker stuff like a tag team that's called Player 1 and Player 2. There's one tag team that they believe they are the manifested gods from Egyptian mythology. I mean, I personally love that kind of just completely we're selling the fact that this is utterly supernatural and it's absolutely about deep, important character building things. And also you're throwing each other around the ring. I personally find that to be entertaining. I also like WWE for different reasons. I mean, I don't dislike it. But yeah, Chikara Pro, Lucha Underground. Also, New Japan has started doing some English language shows. Similar. Might also be useful. But
well, I started watching WWE before WrestleMania 1.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that I really stopped enjoying the whole thing right before the second brand extension. I know that there was a
Yeah.
There was a gap before that, but it was a couple of years before the second one. I just stopped being in I mean, the brand extension kind of ruined everything for me because they were like, we're going to compete with each other. No, you're not.
Right. To be honest, a lot of my dream WWE comes from NXT these days, frankly, because they're doing some really interesting and extremely talented people go on NXT, and they're on there for a couple of years, do some amazing stuff, and then they go to the main brand and nothing happens, which is extremely unfortunate. But the women's division in NXT was just amazing for a long time. Like they're doing stuff like hour-long Iron Man matches in the women's division. You know, brutal 3 out of 5 falls matches, stuff like that.
Before Impact Wrestling became a thing, when TNA, before Hulk Hogan came to TNA,
yep,
the women's division was what I was watching in TNA because it was more interesting than anything else going on, and then they just ruined it.
Yeah. NXT, they just had the downside of NXT is like as their changeover as people go up. So sometimes it kind of sort of reboots every WrestleMania roughly, which is sometimes frustrating. But they just they had a woman called Asuka on there, and she like had a almost 2.5 year winning streak, and little 5 foot tall Asian woman is just murdering people. It's fantastic.
The last time, not the last time I watched, the time before the last time I watched was they were talking a lot about her. Like they had a big, huge 3-minute promo for her introduction. But then I poked around and yeah, I saw that she was in NXT, but I don't know. It if the mainstream WWE was doing something with a women's division like TNA did way back,
they're starting to. They are actually. I mean, they did it's fading off. They had like a all women Royal Rumble. They just did a women's Money in the Bank ladder match. I will say you may want to check the most recent takeover, which is their kind of NXT pay-per-views, because it's currently storylines basically two tag team partners were very popular tag team. One guy turns in the other, and they've been feuding for about a year. The heel, the bad guy is Tommaso Ciampa, and he is so hated right now. He doesn't have theme music. He just walks out, and the crowd starts chanting and yelling at him, and that's his theme music functionally, is them just abusing this guy. They hate him so much, and he's so good at being a bad guy. And they had a Falls Count Anywhere match at TakeOver, and frankly, I mean, really, it's one of those pay-per-views that like 5 matches, and all of them were good, and that was the best match of a whole bunch of really good matches. I mean, there wasn't really a weak match, the entire thing, whereas most WWE pay-per-views, frankly, it's like, okay, 3/4 of this I can fast-forward past, you know? The NXT stuffs are generally pretty good. It's an hour-long show. It's tighter. I think frankly, it's tighter. That really helps.
So, yeah, maybe I'll start watching NXT. The thing with that one guy being hated and whatnot, what worries me is that Vince is going to go, oh, hey, now we should make him a hero because we can do that with, just forcing it down everybody's throat. Like they tried to make Roman Reigns hated, and they couldn't get him to be popular or hated either way for the longest time.
No, I agree. A lot of them, frankly, get a little bit squandered when they move up to the main card. But I mean, I still watch it because it's on. But I mean, it comes down to it's like I have Raw in the background, I'll have SmackDown in the background, I'll kind of vaguely watch it. But when NXT comes on, I will watch it because I mean, it's training programs. So sometimes it's only 2 or 3 matches, and sometimes they're not great because they have new people coming out and trying out. So I mean, it's not always gold, but the takeovers in general, all of them have been entertaining. So every 3 months they do one, and it's always been pretty good. I mean, whenever Raw and SmackDown comes to Atlanta, we don't bother. NXT comes to Atlanta, we make sure we get seats. So
we went to a taping of WCW Saturday Night one night, so we were on TV for 3 weeks in a row because we were on the camera side in the front row.
Nice.
And we also attended a SmackDown in Grand Forks, North Dakota, and that I didn't. Not only was that not anywhere near the other experience, I had great fun at the WCW Saturday Night, but the SmackDown, it was, I don't know, it felt like I was on the TV show, but there wasn't any. We didn't get to see any of the backstage stuff, and everything that was happening in the ring was, when there wasn't a match or somebody talking in there, it was just kind of like dead air, and I'm like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've been to a few WrestleManias. I've been to a couple of hell, I've got my Shinsuke Nakamura shirt on right now. But the NXT live events are always a lot of fun. Ring of Honor, I've been to a couple of those shows. Those are fun. Anyway, I can talk about wrestling all day. The short term of all of that was that if you do want to check back in, I would suggest Lucha Underground, because, again, the first 2 seasons are on Netflix. Watch that. If you enjoy that, you probably like more of that. And then if you like that, you probably like Chikara too.
The Chikara thing, I haven't found anywhere to sample a full show. I found matches, but I haven't found a full. Yeah,
you have to buy them. They sell DVDs. It's the only way you can really see it. Last I checked.
So the way they're only DVDs, they're not like downloadable stuff.
I don't think so. No.
Oh my God, that's even worse. I feel so sorry for them.
Yeah, I mean, they may have changed recently. It's been a few years since I've checked on them, but last I checked, it was like you had to buy a DVD. They may have a downloadable thing now. I know New Japan has a website where you can actually get us a monthly subscription to watch the videos online. So some of them are catching up.
Yeah, if that was DVD only, that would be it right there.
Yeah.
And now that we have not the other 2 left while we were talking wrestling, we can include them.
So you want to get a drink?
Oh, hi. Wait, I did too, and I didn't bring it back with me. There it is. Good thing you said something.
So, in recent months, we have tried to keep the show to like 2 hours, which we're technically coming up on. But if nobody cares, we can just go out as long as we want.
Well, actually, I was going to say, I probably should go because it's midnight my time, and I do need to get some sleep. So
okay, so hang out after I end the show, Eddie, for just a bit.
No problem.
So we'll wrap her up now. Do you want to plug anything other than what we've already plugged most of the show?
Well, to be fair, if you want to chat with me online or follow my stuff, I'm at any social media website at Eddy Fate. That's EDDYFATE. You can go to my website, eddyfate.com. And if you want to know more about Pugmire specifically, which is my creator-owned stuff, all the Pugmire stuff is at realmsofpugmire.com.
Oh, I didn't know there was a separate website. I've been going to the Onyx Path website.
Yes, there's this, because the Realms of Pugmire has not only the Onyx Path stuff, but also things like one of the anthologies I wrote for. We're working on the interactive audio drama for Pugmire, which will be coming out for Alexa and iOS soon. So it's kind of one-stop shop to get all of your Pugmire goodies.
Sweet. Well, I want to thank you for joining us, Eddie.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
And Kevin, I'm glad you came and showed up, being the only host that, other than myself and Trisha, that show up on a regular basis.
I made sure it's clear tonight, but sorry for not speaking much. He just dominated the conversation,
but you're traditionally quiet most of the time anyway.
Yeah, because he talks so much.
Well, that's how that works. And of course, my wife. It's good that you joined us too.
And we actually had some cool conversations. You thought you were going to be out for the whole thing, and we did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I did find some stuff to talk about.
There you go. See.
All right. So for the viewers and listeners, if you're listening to the audio version, this will be it. But like I told Eddie to hang out a little bit, and we will see you as soon as possible on the next episode of The Greatest Show. So say goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.